Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Avery arrived at Willow Grove Grill with a heavy heart and her nerves in shreds. She was still shaken by what had just happened. She was on her way to the restaurant when, as she left the parking lot, a hurried driver nearly crashed into her car. To avoid the collision, she sharply turned the wheel and scraped the side of her car against a pole. It was an ugly scratch. She stopped the car trembling, took a deep breath, and tried to hold back the tears. She thought about giving up and going back home, but decided to go to the restaurant anyway. It was the least she could do. The valet looked at the scratched car and then at her with some pity. Avery avoided his gaze and entered the restaurant feeling the weight of an entire day falling apart. As soon as the maitre saw her, he kindly asked if she was Avery Harper. Hearing her last name stirred something in her. She hadn't heard that name said alongside hers in a long time. Caleb always liked making reservations with full names, saying it gave an air of respect. For a moment, she smiled, more out of memory than joy. She was led to a table near the window. A glass of wine was already there. Caleb had made the reservation in advance, as he did on birthdays and special occasions. She sat down, took off her wet coat, and tried to fix her hair with her fingers. She had gotten dressed carefully, but everything seemed to have spiraled out of control. Her lipstick was already smudged, and her hands were trembling slightly. Alone at the table, Avery watched the couples around her. Some laughed loudly, others talked tenderly. The sound of cutlery, the toasts, everything seemed to echo a life she once had. She picked up the napkin, pretending to dab her lips, while actually trying to hide the emotion rising in her chest. She closed her eyes for a few seconds and, without realizing it, began to remember everything. From the beginning. She had just graduated from college when she got a job at the accounting firm. She was enthusiastic, full of ideas, and determined to climb fast. Caleb was an old client of the company, and from the first meeting, there was something different about him. It wasn't just the charisma, it was the way he paid attention to what she said. Even though he was more experienced, he treated Avery as an equal. The conversations became more personal over time. They exchanged professional contacts, and naturally, the topics began to go beyond numbers. Not long after, they started going out. First quick coffees, then dinners. Before they realized it, they were inseparable. Caleb was confident, fun, a man who seemed to have control over his own life and, at the same time, was willing to share everything with her. He praised every achievement of hers, attended important meetings, waited outside when she had nerve-wracking presentations. Avery felt like she had found someone who truly saw her. The marriage proposal came less than a year later. It was intimate, sincere, and she accepted without hesitation. The wedding was beautiful, even if simple. The families got along well, and their friends seemed to root for them. During the first 3 years, everything flowed with a lightness she thought was rare. They shared responsibilities, laughed at small things, and made plans for the future. They thought about traveling, buying a bigger house, maybe starting a family. Avery felt at peace with him. It was as if the world paused a little when they were together. As she waited at the restaurant table, these memories mixed with the present. She looked at the clock, adjusted the cutlery, drank short sips of wine trying to control her nervousness. She still didn't know if Caleb would actually show up. Since what happened, they hadn't spoken in person. Avery tried contacting him a few times, sent messages, left voicemails, but he never replied. When she suggested dinner, she expected to be ignored, as had happened before. But instead, Caleb made the reservation himself and responded with a simple phrase, "I'll be there at 8." That was enough to rekindle a spark of hope, or perhaps just another illusion. Avery knew this meeting was the last chance for something. She wasn't sure exactly what. Forgiveness? Understanding? A goodbye? She just wanted to look into his eyes and say what she never had the courage to say. She wanted to tell him things she had kept to herself for too long. But now, sitting there, all she could feel was her tightened breathing and the emptiness that forms when you're waiting for someone who might not walk through the door. A waiter approached and asked if she'd like to order something while she waited. She thanked him but declined. She absent-mindedly fiddled with the wedding ring she still wore, though only when alone. Her gaze wandered for moments, trying to imagine whether Caleb was on his way, had changed his mind, or if, in truth, he simply wanted to silently end that chapter. She stayed there, caught between what she lived and what she let slip away. Each passing minute increased the tension in her chest. It wasn't just the weight. It was the fear of facing her own mistakes, of admitting what she felt, and hearing something she might not be ready to hear. And yet, she needed to be there. Because deep down, she knew everything would begin or end at that table. The feeling that something was out of place started subtly. Avery tried to convince herself it was just the natural way of living together. But there was a restlessness in her chest that repeated more frequently, even in moments that should have been happy. Caleb was still kind, still attentive, but he had become predictable. The affection remained, but the passion seemed to have quietly slipped away. She missed something, and that something was hard to name. She began waking up with less enthusiasm, coming home from work more tired than she should be, and avoiding certain conversations. On the outside, she maintained the appearance of a devoted wife. Inside, she carried doubts that grew like cracks. It was during this moment of vulnerability that Miles Donovan appeared. A new client at the firm, from another city, with a bold and confident manner that contrasted with Avery's safe routine. He was involved in a business expansion project, and coincidentally, Caleb also participated as one of the investors. This created a bridge between the two worlds, and between the two men. From the first meeting, Avery noticed how Miles stood out. He spoke firmly, smiled with intention, and looked at her in a way that reminded her of who she was before all of this. Interactions with Miles started like any other professional relationship. But over time, the conversations began including compliments, off-topic comments, personal questions. He showed interest in everything, her work, her vision of the future, her tastes. Avery tried to maintain formality, but his attention filled a space she had been trying to ignore. She began looking forward to meetings where he would be present. Later, she started responding to his messages with an enthusiasm she preferred not to admit. And when she realized it, she was already entering dangerous territory. The breaking point came on an ordinary workday. The firm had scheduled an important meeting with both clients, Caleb and Miles, to discuss the next steps of a joint project. It was just an update on results, but the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. Caleb was serious, focused on the numbers. Miles, on the other hand, kept that provocative air, throwing persistent looks at Avery. At one point, he joked that, some people seemed distracted lately. Caleb didn't catch the tone, just looked silently, but Avery felt her blood run cold. That provocation threw her off balance. She tried to regain control of the meeting, forcing a smile, but her mind was already elsewhere. That night at home, Caleb mentioned that he thought Miles was a bit invasive, too informal for a project of that size. Avery responded that he was like that with everyone. She pretended to be tired, went to bed early, and cried quietly in the bathroom before lying down. She felt ashamed. Not only for what she had already done, but for realizing that, despite all the warning signs, she still felt attracted to Miles. Their involvement had started weeks before that meeting. A stolen kiss in the firm's parking lot evolved into quick meetings at distant cafes. Then came the motels, the flimsy excuses, the late-night messages. She told herself it was just a fling, that she had control over the situation. But Miles wanted more. He called when she was at home. Sent suggestive pictures, even knowing the risks. And Avery, instead of cutting things off completely, hesitated. Every time she said it would be the last meeting, she scheduled another one. Miles began to become a real problem. He sent gifts, wanted to talk about the future. One afternoon, he showed up at the firm with a small box. Said it was a thank you for everything she had been doing for the project. Avery refused to open it in front of her colleagues and put it in her bag. When she got home, locked in the bathroom, she opened the box with trembling hands. It was an elegant necklace, with a blue stone wrapped in silver. Alongside it, a note, "You deserve more than what you're living." The phrase echoed in her head for days. It was as if he knew what she felt, as if he had read the thoughts she herself was trying to suppress. And the worst part, Miles was willing to come clean about everything. He wanted to pull her out of the life he saw as mediocre. He wanted to flaunt the relationship, make it public. This terrified her. Because, as much as she felt something for him, she wasn't ready to completely destroy the world she had built with Caleb. Even empty, it was still the only place where she felt safe. The conflict between what she lived and what she desired began consuming her peace. She no longer slept well. Even Caleb's touch made her tremble with guilt. The fear of being discovered was present in everything, in her colleagues' looks, in her encounters with Miles, even in silent moments at home. And despite all this, she couldn't stop. The line had already been crossed. And now, it wasn't just about desire or loneliness. It was a choice that, consciously or not, she had been making every day. Little did she know that the consequences of that choice would come faster than she imagined, and in a way none of them would forget. It was their wedding anniversary, and since early morning, Avery felt as if her whole body carried the weight of the choices she had been making. She woke up without an appetite, ignored birthday wishes from her mother and brother, and spent hours staring at the necklace hidden in the drawer. The same one Miles had given her days before, with that provocative note. She had decided, she would end it once and for all. She needed to find Miles before dinner. It wouldn't make sense to look Caleb in the eye that night knowing she was still trapped in something that had been silently destroying everything. Miles insisted they meet at the company building, where a quarterly closing event would gather some of the main clients, including Caleb. But she reassured him, said Caleb wouldn't show up. According to her, he was handling something else, and they would meet directly at the restaurant. Miles accepted the meeting with that confident look of someone who thought he had everything under control. As soon as she arrived, he was already waiting in the lobby. He wore a shirt she had complimented before, as if wanting to provoke even more. Without saying anything, he extended his hand with a small box. She refused, said it was crazy to show up with another gift, but he insisted, pushing the box against her chest with a half-smile. Avery held it for a moment, then dropped it into her bag, as if wanting to get rid of it as soon as possible. She said they needed to talk in a more private place. Miles suggested a meeting room that wouldn't be used that day. She hesitated but eventually agreed. When they entered the room, Avery tried to stay focused. She said it was over, that it no longer made sense, that it had gone too far. Miles listened but countered each sentence with sharp arguments, saying she was stuck in a facade of a life, that she was unhappy, and that he was the only real thing she had felt in a long time. She stepped back, asked him to stop, but he moved closer again and pulled her into a kiss. A kiss loaded with everything she wanted to bury. And it was at that exact moment that the door of the room burst open. Caleb appeared out of nowhere, eyes wide, shoulders tense, face in shock. He had come there to surprise Avery with flowers, something symbolic, just to show he still believed in them. He held the bouquet in his hand but dropped it on the floor as soon as he saw what was happening in front of him. Avery recoiled in panic. Miles just smiled, defiant. The silence lasted only a few seconds but felt like an eternity. Caleb took a step forward, pointed his finger at her, and let out everything he had been holding in. He called them trash, said he now understood every vacant look, every flimsy excuse, every time she avoided him. His voice was firm, full of anger, but it didn't tremble. Avery tried to say something, but she cried so hard she could barely form words. Miles, on the other hand, crossed his arms and laughed. He said that scene was pathetic. that Avery never truly loved Caleb. And, looking him in the eyes, he fired, "I've been sleeping with your wife for a while, Caleb. And now she belongs to me." Avery screamed for him to shut up, but it was too late. Caleb stared at Miles for a few seconds, then looked at Avery as if seeing a stranger. The words died in his throat. He simply turned around and left the room without saying another word. The door slammed, and all that was left was the sound of Avery's sobs echoing alone in that place. Caleb left the room without looking back. His head throbbed. The image of Avery in Miles's arms replayed like an endless sequence, tearing at his chest with every step he took. He got into the car still with clenched fists. His breathing was uneven, his jaw tight. On the passenger seat, the bouquet of flowers he had brought for his wife now seemed like a cruel joke. He started the car and headed toward their house, unsure of what he would do when he got there. He had no plan. He just wanted to get away from there. On the way, his phone started vibrating. It was Avery. He ignored the first call. The second too. On the third, he answered. She was crying on the other end. Barely able to form sentences. She tried apologizing, tried justifying what was impossible to justify. Caleb didn't let her finish. He said only one sentence, his voice cold and firm. "Please, don't come home. Avoid the worst." And he hung up. Inside the company, the scene was still being talked about. Other employees witnessed the argument, some saw Caleb leave distraught, others saw Avery in tears and Miles with a puffed-up chest, smiling smugly as if it were a conquest. He tried approaching Avery, still in the hallway, and said, "Come with me. Let's go to my place. Leave all this behind." She turned her face in anger. Called him selfish, an idiot. Said he was worthless, that he only thought of himself. Miles tried arguing, but she yelled. "Get out of my life, Miles. Please. Disappear." His smile faded, and for a few seconds, he stood there, motionless, unsure of what to do. But upon noticing the stares around him, he puffed up his chest again, adjusted his jacket, and walked out with the same arrogant air as always, as if nothing had happened. But inside, he already felt that something was off. That night, Avery went to a friend's house. She cried until her eyes couldn't take it anymore. She tried calling Caleb again, but he didn't answer. She sent long, desperate messages, asking to talk, pleading for a chance to explain, saying it was all a mistake, that she still loved him. But silence was the only response. The next morning, Caleb woke up early, showered, dressed as if heading to a regular meeting, and went straight to see a lawyer. He sat calmly, told everything, handed over documents, initiated the divorce process, and requested to do it as quickly as possible. He wasn't interested in hearing justifications. He wanted it resolved. And he resolved it. That same morning, Miles still thought nothing would change. That Caleb would be hurt for a while but would come to his senses and keep the investments. But Caleb didn't stay silent. He picked up the phone and called each investor involved in the projects with Miles. He explained what had happened, calmly, without exaggeration. He said he wouldn't work with someone who crossed ethical and personal boundaries in such a way. Within hours, Miles's phone started ringing non-stop. One by one, the contracts were cancelled. All of them. No exceptions. Trust had been broken. And Caleb was respected too much for anyone to risk their reputation for Miles. Meanwhile, Avery woke up with swollen eyes at her friend's house. She barely had breakfast when the phone rang. It was her boss. His voice was dry, direct. "We need to talk." She replied that she wasn't in any condition that day. Said she wasn't feeling well. But he was blunt. "I heard everything, and honestly, I didn't want to say this over the phone. But you no longer belong on our staff." She hung up without the strength to react. she sat on the couch and cried again. It hurt, of course, but nothing compared to the pain of losing Caleb. The job, the reputation, the friends, all of that seemed small compared to the feeling of emptiness. She returned home late in the afternoon, hoping to find some clue, a suitcase, a note. But upon entering, she realized Caleb had already taken everything. Clothes, documents, books. The drawers were empty. Her closet seemed more spacious than ever. She tried calling his mother, but the response was curt. I don't know where he is either. Days passed. The silence dragged on. Until an envelope arrived, the divorce notification. When she held the paper in her hands, she trembled. It made everything real. But before signing, she tried one last time. She sent a message to Caleb asking for a meeting. A dinner. Just a conversation. He took a while to respond, but he did. He said, I'll be at Willow Grove at 8. And then, everything came back to where it had started. The same table, the same wait. And a hope that, perhaps, was already too late to sustain. When Caleb walked in, she felt the air leave her lungs for a few seconds. He wore a simple shirt, but he looked older, firmer. His gaze met hers without wavering. He walked to the table calmly, pulled out the chair, and sat down in silence. No smile. No greeting. Avery took a deep breath, stared at the folded napkin, and, with a low and shaky voice, broke the ice. I know you didn't have to be here. But thank you for coming. Caleb remained quiet. She began to speak. She said she had made a mistake, that she knew the extent of the pain she caused, that she lost everything because of her choices. She recounted how regret came quickly, but pride and fear kept her from stepping back. She spoke of the suffering since the day he left, the loss of her job, the humiliation, and the sleepless nights imagining where he might be. Tears streamed uncontrollably, but she pushed through to the end, asking for forgiveness. Caleb listened to everything in silence. Not one interruption. He simply looked into her eyes with the firmness of someone who had already lived through everything needed to make a decision. When she finished, he sighed and said, with a calm but definitive voice, I'm not here because I want to get back together with you. I'm here because you deserve to be heard. It was fair. You lost the respect of your colleagues, your job, the man you traded our marriage for, and now, you're going to lose me. This isn't revenge. It's consequence. She collapsed. She tried arguing, begged for another chance, but he stood up and left without looking back, leaving Avery alone at the table, surrounded by memories, guilt, and a loneliness that hurt more than any silence. That was the end. 2 months passed since that dinner, and the divorce was finalized. While Avery tried to start over, even without knowing where to begin, Miles faced his true collapse. The company he swore was unshakable began to crumble quickly. By cutting ties with him, Caleb influenced all the other investors. One by one, the contracts ended. Without capital injection, the project stopped. The payroll was high, the office rent was overdue, and the bills began to pile up. Miles tried to maintain his arrogant demeanor for a while. He said he would turn things around. But deep down, he knew failure was at the door. He began to feel chills, not because the affair with Avery had ended, but out of fear of bankruptcy. And he went bankrupt. The following month, he was forced to lay off all the employees. The office doors closed. Some former employees filed lawsuits over unpaid wages. And the name Miles Donovan, once associated with success and ambition, began circulating in conversations as an example of downfall, impulsiveness, and arrogance. He lost everything. And the silence that followed wasn't the same one Caleb chose when he left. Miles's silence was the silence of someone who hadn't learned anything, even after watching everything fall apart. As for Caleb chose peace. And that, more than any revenge, was his greatest victory. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.